The date is the 19th of February 2026, and the ancient stone floors of St. George's Hall within Windsor Castle are echoing with the footsteps of destiny. Under the vaulted ceiling, beneath the heraldic achievements of every Knight of the Garter since the medieval era, William, Prince of Wales, stood behind a gilded lectern not merely as the heir, but as the acting sovereign. The air was cold, the atmosphere heavy, with the kind of historical gravity that usually precedes a declaration of war or the demise of the crown. But today, the war was internal, and the death was symbolic. William looked out at the gathered royal rota, his face a mask of steel resolve, and delivered a statement that would shatter the remaining fragile ties between the House of Windsor and the House of Sussex. He began solemnly, declaring that today the monarchy enters a new chapter, one where clarity, duty, and discipline guide the future. He stated with a voice that carried the weight of 1,000 years of history that they are not a dynasty of sentiment, but one of stewardship. This was not a routine royal speech filled with platitudes. This was the public revelation of Royal Order Number 17, a directive that had been drafted in absolute secrecy over the preceding months under the advice of the Princess Royal, the Lord President of the Council, and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. Unanimously approved by the newly formed Royal Family Tribunal just 48 hours prior, this order represented the formal, irreversible rejection of Prince Harry's return to any official royal role. It was a document that codified the exile. The order reaffirmed the indefinite suspension of all titles, privileges, heraldry, and sovereign grant funding previously held by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. It froze any assets or inheritance within the Crown estate linked to the Sussex branch. But the most chilling line of William's address was his justification. He stated that if the monarchy could find the strength to remove Prince Andrew for the survival of the crown, they must also find the strength to protect that crown from further erosion, even when that protection means drawing lines within their own blood. To understand the full magnitude of this moment, one must look back to the precedent that emboldened William to act with such ruthlessness. William's declaration explicitly invoked the order from the 30th of October 2025, when King Charles III stripped Prince Andrew of everything. In that historic and brutal act, Charles revoked the styles of His Royal Highness and the Duke of York, reclassifying his brother under the private surname Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. But the king went further. He evicted Andrew from the Royal Lodge, a residence Andrew had held under a 75-year lease. Despite a personal promise made to Queen Elizabeth II not to displace her favorite son during her lifetime, Charles acted for the good of the institution. Andrew now resides in Marsh Farm, a dilapidated cottage on the edge of the Sandringham estate, located in a known floodplain with no private chapel, no staff quarters, and no active Ravip protection infrastructure. William used this precedent as a shield and a sword. He argued that when his father made that decision, he did so at great personal cost and in defiance of promises, but in loyalty to the institution. That decision was not a moment of exile. It was the birth of what is now recognized as the doctrine of internal discipline. This doctrine has now been extended to Prince Harry. Following the finalization of a confidential divorce from Meghan Markle in January 2026, the couple's split unleashed a storm of custody conflicts and leaked attempts at reputational damage control. William's new order confirmed what insiders already suspected. The royal family would make no exception for Harry simply because he was the king's son. The immunity of blood was gone. The catalyst for this final severance was a confidential dossier submitted to the tribunal on February 10 by an unlikely investigator, Lady Louise Windsor. At just 22 years old, Louise has been quietly working alongside royal legal officers, and her 117-page report was the smoking gun the palace needed. The dossier detailed irregularities in Archie and Lilibet's birth records across jurisdictions and commercial agreements that monetized the children's names and images. But the revelation that shocked the legal advisors and the Privy Council to their core was a media licensing deal Meghan Markle had allegedly approved. The deal was for a children's series titled The Sussex Kitchen, in which Archie and Lilibet would feature as recurring characters. This was not a documentary about their lives. It was a product launch. It was the commodification of royal children for entertainment value. Lord Pembroke later stated that this report changed everything. The Crown could no longer treat this situation as a personal conflict or a family feud. It became a matter of succession, of legitimacy, and of moral precedent. If the monarchy allowed its descendants to be sold as characters in a cooking show, the dignity of the institution would be irrevocably compromised. The February 15 order introduced a new constitutional role designed specifically to counter this threat: royal matrons. Catherine, Princess of Wales, and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, were named the legal guardians and custodians of Archie and Lilibet's interests in the event of parental incapacity or loss of custody. While the children would not be granted princely titles, their legal rights, education, healthcare, and crucially, their image rights would be protected by the Crown. William assured the public that these are still children of Windsor, and their future would not be bartered in the court of public opinion, nor auctioned through entertainment platforms. This was a seizure of the children's digital likeness, a legal maneuver to block Meghan from fulfilling the contract she had allegedly signed. Just as the order was being finalized, a heartbreaking leak from Montecito changed the emotional stakes of the conflict. Sources revealed that Prince Harry had privately contacted Princess Catherine's team, bypassing Meghan entirely. He offered to relinquish full custodial rights to the royal family in exchange for keeping the divorce documents sealed and protecting the children from the media crossfire. His reported plea was a question that haunted the halls of Kensington Palace. If I let go, will they finally be safe? It was the surrender of a defeated man. But Meghan's legal team filed objections on February 17, mere hours after William's public declaration. Their motion sought to halt any form of guardianship transfer without Meghan's direct consent, setting the stage for an unprecedented transatlantic legal dispute. Despite the mounting controversy and the legal threats from California, William's tone remained measured yet firm. He stated that his duty is not to comfort discomfort, but to uphold legacy. He declared that his role is not to reconcile the irreconcilable, but to protect those yet too young to understand what has been done in their name. The global press erupted, with headlines from Sydney to New York calling it a constitutional rupture wrapped in calm. But within Britain, the reaction was different. Approval ratings for William as the future king soared to 84%. A morning editorial in The Times simply read, "He chose the crown." Thus began the formal implementation of the Royal Reset Doctrine, a new constitutional strategy for the post-Elizabethan age, with a prince at its helm who was no longer defined by birthright alone, but by clarity, courage, and command. The formation of the Royal Tribunal stunned even veteran palace watchers who thought they had seen everything. Unlike previous internal reviews, which were informal and advisory, this body bore the weight of full sovereign authority. Lord Alistair Pembroke, the Lord President of the Council, stood before the public and announced that this marked the first establishment of a sovereign family court within the British monarchy since the dissolution of the Plantagenet line. Its jurisdiction includes, but is not limited to, titles, access, representation, and child guardianship. This was a court created to police the family itself, ensuring that no member could ever again threaten the integrity of the institution from within. Behind the palace gates, Princess Catherine and Duchess Sophie had already anticipated the escalation. For months, they had meticulously prepared for this moment, quietly working with education, child welfare, and security advisors to create a plan that would protect Archie and Lilibet under any eventuality. The decision to designate Catherine as royal matron of the House of Windsor was not merely ceremonial. It placed her at the center of all decisions regarding the children's future. Catherine had remained silent during the weeks of public debate, refusing to engage with the noise. But within the tribunal, her voice carried unshakable weight. When pressed on the emotional toll of assuming legal stewardship over children born into controversy, she reportedly responded that this is not a punishment, it is a shield. She argued that these children are not at fault for the ambition of their parents, and they deserve the protection of their bloodline. Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, acting as Vice Chancellor of Domestic Affairs, provided a stark assessment that underscored the ruthless logic of the tribunal. She stated that they must restore the meaning of lineage. It cannot be selectively invoked when convenient, then discarded when accountability arises. Across the Atlantic, Meghan's legal team filed an immediate objection, claiming that the Royal Tribunal had no jurisdiction over California-based minors and accusing the Crown of historical overreach and emotional coercion. But Lord Pembroke swiftly countered with a legal argument that had been prepared for months. He stated that while the tribunal recognizes that Archie and Lilibet are physically located in the United States, their birth titles, past privileges, and public treatment have been deeply intertwined with the institution of the Crown. Legal standing was granted through that connection, and legal review can withdraw it. Meanwhile, intelligence reports submitted to the tribunal indicated concerning discrepancies in how Meghan and Harry had previously reported the children's citizenship, schooling, and even medical records. These discrepancies are now being investigated by British and U.S. authorities alike, creating a pincer movement of legal jeopardy around the Sussexes. Lady Louise Windsor, who had quietly compiled the family's internal child welfare dossier over the past year, submitted a 93-page report outlining inconsistencies in documentation, irregularities in name registration, and conflicts between Meghan's public interviews and institutional records. This was the forensic accounting of a life lived loosely with the truth. The final scene of the session was both symbolic and seismic. Prince William stood before the tribunal holding two objects: Queen Elizabeth II's sealed letter, which she had left for him, and a printed copy of Royal Order No. 17. He did not read the Queen's letter aloud, preserving her privacy even in death. Instead, he spoke from memory, quoting her final advice to him. She told him not to let duty become diluted by sentiment. She reminded him that he is not just their brother, he is the heir to a nation. He placed the Queen's envelope into the royal archives, sealing her wisdom into the history of the Crown. Then, he signed the order. He concluded by saying, "Let this mark the line, and let the children be protected from what follows." The private audience between King Charles and Prince William that preceded this public declaration had been brief but definitive. The monarch, frail from his recent health battles but firm in his resolve, had signed the writs first for Andrew, then for Harry. Though the ink was barely dry on the Duke of York's final expulsion from all royal patronage, it was already being cited as precedent. Behind the gates of Windsor Castle, William convened a closed royal council attended only by bloodline advisors and Lord Pembroke. On the table lay a strategic dossier marked Duke of Sussex Disciplinary Response Phase 2. William opened the meeting with a level voice, stating that His Majesty set the tone with Andrew, and they would continue in full accordance. No sentiment, no compromise, no exception. Pembroke nodded in agreement, noting that it is now legal precedent that even a direct son of the sovereign, if deemed institutionally harmful, can be expelled without recourse. The room was silent, acknowledging the gravity of what they were about to do. Then the Princess Royal spoke, recalling the Queen's warnings before her death. William's jaw tightened as he acknowledged that his grandmother feared a split, but she feared weakness more. She never betrayed the crown this brazenly. Indeed, Queen Elizabeth II had once privately told Anne and Charles to keep the line intact, cautioning against public humiliation of the family. But that was before Meghan's commercial scandals, the alleged Netflix money laundering, and now the potential custody weaponization of Archie and Lilibet via the Sussex Kitchen. With Andrew's downfall legitimized as the modern model for royal discipline, William prepared to apply the doctrine more forcefully to Harry. A classified memorandum was drawn up and delivered to the Ministry of Justice, outlining grounds for invoking Royal Separation Protocol 14-7, originally drafted during the abdication crisis of Edward VIII. The public learned of it only when the London Gazette published a one-line notice stating that the Duke of Sussex will no longer be accorded sovereign privileges, travel protections, or institutional representation within the United Kingdom, effective immediately. Public shock mingled with relief. Polls taken the next morning showed that 68% of Britons approved of the decision. The monarchy's approval rating spiked, proving that the public valued strength over drama. But for Harry, the silence that followed was deafening. Back in Montecito, Harry read the decree from his iPad screen. The children were asleep. Meghan was in another room on a video call with legal counsel, strategizing her next move. He reread the final line of the letter, which stated that no return shall be contemplated until the children's full legal identities are submitted, verified, and recognized by the Crown. It wasn't just a rejection, it was a challenge. William had made it clear that this was personal as much as institutional. The monarchy would no longer absorb personal disobedience as family drama. It was now a matter of national order. Harry realized in that moment that his brother wasn't just angry, he was done. Meanwhile, Lady Louise Windsor, recently appointed royal legal liaison, prepared to step into the spotlight. At just 22, she had co-authored a confidential report on the legal ambiguities surrounding the birth records and documentation of Archie and Lilibet. Lady Louise's voice trembled slightly as she spoke before the Privy Council, but her words were steady. She stated that there is no biometric verification submitted to the Home Office for either child, no formal residence verification within the UK, and no legal custodial guardian acknowledged under the Royal Household Charter. These revelations were no longer whispers in the tabloids. They were institutional findings backed by the seal of the Crown. It was then that Lord Pembroke stepped forward and announced a historic pivot. For the first time in modern constitutional monarchy, he declared the establishment of a House of Windsor domestic tribunal, an internal royal court to adjudicate matters of succession, custodial legacy, and privilege abuse. This was the mechanism that would enforce the new order. In a surprising twist, Sarah, Duchess of York, submitted a handwritten note the next day addressed to Prince William, supporting the decision. The note read that only when the line is drawn can the people trust the Crown again, and that Diana would have demanded clarity. William folded the letter and locked it in his personal archives, grateful for the unexpected ally. In the days that followed, 2 car seats, unlabeled but clearly for children, were discreetly loaded onto a private plane at RAF Northolt. The pilot manifest was marked "Special Custody Transfer, awaiting clearance." Speculation exploded. Had Harry capitulated? Had a private deal been struck? Then came the leak. An anonymous source from within Montecito revealed that Harry had offered to relinquish custody altogether, telling a friend that if it protects them, he will let them go because he just wants peace. But Meghan had other plans. Lawyers were seen entering and leaving the Montecito estate at odd hours. Rumors swirled about a pending custody war, not in California, but in The Hague, where Meghan's legal team allegedly sought international jurisdiction to bypass UK rulings. The storm wasn't over, it had just changed form. Inside the palace, William turned to Anne and remarked that Harry learned nothing, but the institution has. And as Charles rested, exhausted but resolute, the Crown had moved one step closer to the future, William envisioned, one where titles were not shields and bloodlines did not excuse betrayal. The scene in the Buckingham Palace courtyard was silent, but the tension brewed like an oncoming storm. Prince William's press secretary stepped forward at precisely 9, flanked by the Lord Chamberlain and the Archbishop of Canterbury. The royal seal glistened on the podium. The air was cold, sharp, and ceremonial. Then came the declaration. In keeping with precedent and moral duty, and having reviewed the outcome of the private royal court deliberations, His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales has issued a sovereign recommendation to permanently withhold the reinstatement of any royal titles, privileges, or ceremonial roles for Prince Henry of Sussex. A gasp rippled across the gathered press corps, but the statement went further than expected. The palace revealed that Prince William had formally invoked the House disciplinary mandate, modeled after King Charles's own precedent in the removal of Prince Andrew. William called it the benchmark of necessary accountability, referencing how Charles had overridden the late Queen Elizabeth's protective final wish that Andrew remain in Royal Lodge until death. William stated that if the king could overturn the late sovereign's dying favor to protect the dignity of the institution, then he could ensure the same logic applies to his brother. The royal household has now classified Harry as a non-participating former royal, a title with no standing in the order of succession, funding, or ceremonial obligations. Additionally, per recommendations from the Lord President of the Council, Prince William ordered that Harry's legal petition for re-entry be archived with prejudice, meaning it can never be resubmitted. But the shock came not from Harry's exclusion alone, but rather from the comprehensive future-proofing measures embedded in the announcement. Lady Louise Windsor, delivering a detailed family legal statement on behalf of the Royal Legal Commission, confirmed that the family court had ruled that Archie and Lilibet are not subject to automatic royal succession protection. She read that custody, welfare, and status will be determined through merit, integrity, and transparency, not by birth titles. This was a clear response to the growing concern that Meghan Markle might leverage the children's titles to demand benefits or future political influence in the UK or Commonwealth realms. The declaration also underscored a principle that shocked constitutional observers: custody of royal-adjacent minors, if contested between feuding former royals, can fall under the jurisdiction of a specialized house court. Recently formalized Lord Pembroke confirmed that this is the first time in modern British history that a separate intra-royal court has been codified to resolve issues of succession, fraud, ethical endangerment, and misuse of institutional prestige. In a surprising twist, Sarah, Duchess of York, publicly endorsed Prince William's judgment. Her handwritten letter, released with her consent, included the line that only with firm, unapologetic lines drawn between merit and chaos can the royal family survive this media age. She called it not exile, but preservation. The message marked a significant shift from the Ferguson family's previous informal alignment with Meghan and Harry, signaling that even former sympathizers are now prioritizing institutional clarity over personal loyalty. They realized that the ship was sinking, and they did not want to be dragged down with it. Meanwhile, a leaked email from a Montecito staffer hinted at Harry's growing emotional collapse. The staffer claimed he is talking about walking away completely from the kids, the titles, and everything. But there is a catch. Meghan Markle reportedly refuses to release any claim to full custody, viewing the children as essential to her public narrative and long-term brand. Palace insiders now suspect a custody war is coming, one that could eclipse even the harshest Windsor scandals of the past. At the end of the royal communique, William signed the notice with his full ceremonial title and included one final line: "I follow not only in the king's footsteps, but in the duty we owe to the people, not as brothers, but as guardians of history." There was no room left for ambiguity. The door had closed. The torch had passed. And the message was clear: forgiveness is possible in private life, but never at the expense of the crown. When Prince Harry read the final declaration signed by Prince William, he reportedly sat in silence for 20 minutes, staring at the screen of his locked-down iPad. A source close to Harry described the moment as the end of a hallucination. Whatever hopes he had of returning as a reformed royal had shattered. But what triggered the avalanche wasn't the rejection itself. It was what came next: the legal lockdown on Archie and Lilibet's future. According to confidential excerpts obtained by the Windsor Court Dispatch, the royal household's legal advisors have activated what is being referred to as the Lineage Safeguard Clause, a rarely invoked royal statute dating back to the early 20th century. Originally designed to prevent illegitimate or politically compromised claimants from assuming titles or territorial assets, the clause was quietly revised after the Duke of Windsor's abdication scandal in 1936, and again following Lord Mountbatten's assassination. It gives the reigning monarch or the acting sovereign in his absence the power to withhold royal passage and recognition to descendants who bear the name but not the fidelity of the crown. This legal mechanism, now officially invoked by William and ratified by King Charles, bars Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor and Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor from receiving royal trust entitlements, property claims, or ceremonial placements until they turn 21, and only then upon passing a full ethics and identity audit before the Crown Court. In effect, their royal identity has been paused indefinitely. They are now listed as out-of-status descendants, OSD, the first such designation in modern history. Meghan Markle's response was neither composed nor diplomatic. Shortly after the announcement, she allegedly stormed out of a private planning session with her publicist and crisis communications team. Leaked footage captured Meghan pacing her Montecito estate's veranda in athletic gear, yelling into a phone that they cannot freeze her children out because she built their global identity and gave them the brand. That final line, "I gave them the brand," went viral within hours. Critics immediately jumped on the phrasing as proof of what many had long suspected. Meghan viewed Archie and Lilibet not as individuals, but as assets within her public relations empire. A scathing editorial in The Spectator ran the headline, "The Grandmother, Meghan's monetization of royal bloodline collapses in real time." While the King and William maintained a measured silence post-declaration, it was Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, who made the first post-fallout public appearance, delivering a speech at the Royal Family Ethics Symposium at Cambridge. Without naming names, Sophie stated that no child should be wielded as a pawn, a product, or a passport. She declared that nobility is not in the title, but in how you protect the name that title bears. Audience members gave a rare standing ovation. Behind the scenes, Sophie has reportedly become a key figure in drafting the Windsor Code of Conduct, a formal set of ethical expectations for anyone bearing the royal surname, regardless of active title status. This includes guidelines around personal branding, media appearances, inheritance claims, and children's legal representation. Insiders claim the code was drafted in anticipation of a Sussex custody battle. Even as emotional turmoil mounted, another reality began to close in: financial collapse. Documents obtained by the Daily Ledger show that Montecito estate property taxes for 2026 are overdue by over $134,000. Combined with the collapse of Archwell's donor base and Netflix's rumored early exit clause worth $20 million in penalties, Prince Harry is now, according to insiders, bleeding cash and emotional resilience. One former Sussex business consultant warned that he is dangerously close to defaulting on the Montecito mortgage. Meghan's personal trust fund was reportedly restructured last year, denying him access. The palace lifeline is gone. There is no plan B. Even more damning was the revelation that Harry quietly reached out to Tyler Perry for emergency bridge financing, a request which, per sources close to Perry, was declined. The reason wasn't personal, the source explained. It was reputational. No one wants to bankroll a man being locked out by both his birth family and the American public. In an extraordinary moment of candor, Prince William's senior aide confirmed that the brothers had one final phone call before the decision was made public. Harry asked him if that was it, if he was just cutting him off forever. William replied that he was letting him go because Harry refused to let go of what broke them. The call ended in silence. This detail, while deeply emotional, was included in the palace's internal report to underscore one thing: Prince William did not act impulsively or out of vengeance. The decision was institutional, not personal, and once made, it was final. At the same time, Queen Camilla, who has remained largely out of the public eye, reportedly supported the firm stance, signaling a rare moment of complete alignment between Charles, William, Anne, Edward, and Camilla. Royal aides now refer to this new posture as the Windsor blockade, a collective refusal to allow Harry and Meghan any back-channel return into the fold. This includes revoked diplomatic protection in the UK, legal severance of family communications, blocked access to personal royal archives, and formal rejection of the children's inclusion in the updated line of succession registry. As of the latest reports, Meghan has allegedly signed a preliminary deal to co-author a tell-all memoir titled "The Crown Kept My Children," a title that legal analysts warn could place her in breach of multiple non-disparagement clauses signed during the couple's 2020 exit negotiations. Royal legal teams are reportedly reviewing whether this constitutes contractual self-destruction. The book, due later this year, is already being viewed as her nuclear option. But palace advisors believe it will not spark sympathy. It will merely validate the Windsor doctrine that silence is not weakness but strength and discipline. Buckingham Palace's eastern wing, once dimly lit by history's shadows, had turned into a fully illuminated command center. Lord Pembroke returned to the lectern in the Royal Gallery to read what would become the most sweeping custodial verdict in the House of Windsor's modern memory. By royal authority under the full advisory of the Family Oversight Council, His Royal Highness Prince William of Wales, acting sovereign, hereby declared the legal and logistical revocation of all internal custodial rights concerning the minors known as Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor and Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor by their biological mother, Rachel Meghan Markle. The effect was seismic. For the first time since Queen Victoria's reign, the United Kingdom's monarchy had created a royal family custodial tribunal distinct from any civil family court. Empowered by the 2024 Succession Reform Charter. It was Princess Anne who had laid the groundwork quietly over 2 years, but it was Lady Louise Windsor, her protege, who finalized the framework for how to isolate royal minors from media exploitation, marital instability, and transatlantic legal loopholes. The tribunal cited over 12 distinct grounds. Among them were Meghan's violations of the 2020 Sussex Agreement, her for-profit use of the children's titles, and a pattern of strategic misinformation in public disclosures. Key evidence included metadata from photoshopped family Christmas cards, monetized narratives contradicting verified medical timelines, and internal Netflix memos linking the release of The Royal Rift to confidential pediatric appointments. Lady Louise stated in her published report that their identities have been weaponized and their privacy sold for leverage. This ruling is not vengeance, it is a rescue. Prince Harry was not present. After weeks of emotional collapse and a string of intercepted communications between his camp and British legal counsel, he had reportedly signed an emotional non-objection agreement on the condition that the children be relocated not to palace grounds, but to a more neutral and less symbolic estate managed by the Crown Guardianship Office in Kent. In this estate, formerly a country home used by Princess Margaret's staff, Archie and Lilibet would be overseen by a team of non-aristocratic caretakers trained in trauma-informed child development. Princess Catherine, now formally titled Guardian General of Royal Minors, would retain spiritual and ceremonial oversight, but without daily physical involvement. She stated that this is not a palace, but it is peace. As the media erupted, Meghan's reaction was swift and venomous through her newly hired crisis PR team, different from the defunct Sunshine Sachs. A social video was released within hours. It showed her sitting beside 2 children's drawings, her eyes filled with tears, whispering that they had erased her motherhood and stolen her babies because she wouldn't bow. But the public no longer bowed to sentiment. The backlash was instant. Hashtags like #ProtectTheLine, #No More Royal Leaks, and #Custody Not Currency trended globally. Commentators across BBC, Sky News, and even CNN cited the legal precedents already upheld in transnational family law, noting that Meghan's prior claim of dual U.S. citizenship for her children would not override protective jurisdiction under the Windsor Charter once residency was declared fraudulent. The final dagger came not from the palace, but from Sarah, Duchess of York. In a letter made public through the Royal Legal Archive, Fergie addressed William directly. She wrote that she once thought silence protected the crown, but she has learned it protects abusers more. In this clarity, she supported the ruling, stating that children are not bargaining chips, not even royal ones. Within hours, the U.S. Embassy in London issued a statement confirming it would not challenge the relocation, citing British jurisdictional primacy and mutual child protection treaties. As for Prince Harry, sources from within Montecito confirmed that he had entered emotional hibernation. A longtime bodyguard said he barely ate, often sleeping in his car rather than inside the house, to avoid the memories in the nursery. But even in this, Meghan refused to concede. She allegedly told her sister-in-law Samantha Markle over a voice message that Harry doesn't understand empire, and he thinks love can undo protocol. Nowhere was this more evident than in the unsigned letter discovered by royal aides 2 days after the tribunal ruling. Addressed simply, "To my children," the handwriting matched Harry's. The ink was smudged at the corner. It read, "I loved you before titles. I love you now. Without them, one day you'll understand why I stepped back. But I hope you'll forgive me for what I couldn't stop." Security arrangements were restructured. Frogmore Cottage was placed under the stewardship of the Crown Estate. Clarence House released a rare formal memorandum, redefining the term royal heir to exclude all descendants of individuals stripped of titles due to institutional violations. And in Scotland, Princess Anne quietly expanded the Family Affairs Office to include a new internal protocol, Code Grey, designed for the containment of internal crises tied to reputational endangerment. But perhaps most haunting was the small change made at the royal family website. Under the family section, beneath a gray and white portrait of King Charles, Prince William, Princess Catherine, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, 2 names were no longer listed: Archie and Lilibet. And in the digital footnote below, it read, "Status updated in accordance with Royal Custodial Tribunal ruling 2026. The page bore no fanfare, no emotion, just a date. And for those watching closely, it marked the end of not just an era, but of a lineage. The House of Windsor had closed its doors, and the Sussexes were left in the cold, holding nothing but their own history.